We are on page 174 of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Master and Vijay Goswami. At the bottom of page 174, it says Monday, January 1st, 1883. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Sri Ramakrishna was seated on a mat spread on the floor of his room at Dakshineshwar. Since it was a cold day, he had wrapped his body in his moleskin shawl. Pran Krishna and M were seated in front of him. Rakal, too, was in the room. Pran Krishna was a high government official and lived in Calcutta. Since he had no offspring by his first wife, with her permission, he had married a second time. By the second wife, he had a son. Because he was rather stout, the master addressed him now and then as the fat Brahman. He had great respect for Sri Ramakrishna. Though a householder, Pran Krishna studied the Vedanta and had been heard to say, "Brahman alone is real and the world illusory. I am he." The master used to say to him, "In the Kali Yuga, the life of a man depends on food. The path of devotion prescribed by Narada is the best for this age." A devotee had brought a basket of jalebi for the master, which, does everyone know what a jalebi is? Okay, they're like fried, they squirt them out, dough through a funnel, and like funnel cakes, but they're fried in deep fat and then soaked in sugar syrup, and they're just really good for you. Guaranteed to give you high cholesterol and clogged arteries, but they're delicious. A devotee had brought a basket of jalebi for the master, which the latter kept by his side. Eating a bit of the sweets, he said to Pran Krishna with a smile, "You see, I chant the name of the Divine Mother, so I get all these good things to eat." Laughter. "But she doesn't give such fruits as gourd or pumpkin. She bestows the fruit of Amrita, immortality, knowledge, love, discrimination, renunciation, and so forth." A boy of 6 or 7 years old entered the room. The master himself became like a child. He covered the contents of the basket with the palm of his hand, as a child does to conceal sweets from another child, lest the latter should snatch them. Then he put the basket aside. Suddenly the master went into samadhi and sat thus a long time. His body was transfixed, his eyes wide open and unblinking, his breathing hardly perceptible. After a long time, he drew a deep breath, indicating his return to the world of sense. Master to Pran Krishna, "My Divine Mother is not only formless, she has forms as well. One can see her forms. One can behold her incomparable beauty through feeling and love. The Master reveals herself to her devotees in different forms. I saw her yesterday. She was clad in a seamless, ochre-colored garment, and she talked with me. She came to me another day as a Muslim girl, 6 or 7 years old. She had a tilak on her head, on her forehead, and was naked. She walked with me, joking and frisking like a child. At Hridoy's house, I had a vision of Gauranga. He wore a black bordered cloth. Haladhara used to say that God is beyond both being and non-being. I told the mother about it and asked her, "Then, is the divine form an illusion?" The Divine Mother appeared to me in the form of Rati's mother and said, "Do thou remain in bhava." Bhava is a rare state of divine exaltation when the devotee, after realizing the absolute, remains in the borderland between the absolute and the relative. In this state, he sees that both the absolute and the relative, as the two aspects of the Godhead, are real. I repeated this to Haladhari. Now and then, I forget her command and suffer. Once I broke my teeth because I didn't remain in bhava. So I shall remain in bhava unless I receive a revelation from heaven or have a direct experience to the contrary. I shall follow the path of love. What do you say? Prankrishna, yes, sir. Master, but why should I ask you about it? There is someone within me who does all these things through me. At times, I used to remain in a mood of godhood and would enjoy no peace of mind unless I were being worshipped. I am the machine and God is the operator. I act as he makes me act. I speak as he makes me speak. Keep your raft, says Ram Prasad, afloat on the sea of life, drifting up with the flood tide, drifting down with the ebb. It is like the cast-off leaf before a gale. Sometimes it is blown to a good place, and sometimes into the gutter, according to the direction of the wind. As the weaver said in the story, the robbery was committed by the will of Rama. I was arrested by the police, by the will of Rama. And again, by the will of Rama, I was set free. Hanuman once said to Rama, O Rama, I have taken refuge in thee. Bless me that I may have pure devotion to thy lotus feet, and that I may not be caught in the spell of thy world-bewitching Maya. Once a dying bullfrog said to Rama, O Rama, when caught by a snake, I cry for your protection. But now I am about to die, struck by your arrow. Hence I am silent. I used to see God directly with these very eyes, just as I see you. Now I see divine visions in trance. After realizing God, a man becomes like a child. One acquires the nature of the object one meditates upon. The nature of God is like that of a child. As a child builds up his toy house and then breaks it down, so God acts while creating, preserving, and destroying the universe. Further, as the child is not under the control of any guna, so God is beyond the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. That is why Paramahamsas keep 5 or 10 children with them, that they may assume their nature. Sitting on the floor of the room was a young man from Agarpara, about 22 years old. When he came to the temple garden, he would take the master aside by a sign and whisper his thoughts to him. He was a newcomer. That day he was sitting on the floor near the master. Master to the young man, a man can change his nature by imitating another's character. He can get rid of a passion like lust by assuming the feminine mood. He gradually comes to act exactly like a woman. I have noticed that men who take female parts in the theater speak like women or brush their teeth like women while bathing. Come again on a Tuesday or Saturday. To Prankrishna, Brahman and Shakti are inseparable. Unless you accept Shakti, you will find the whole universe unreal. I, you, house, buildings, and family. The world stands solid because the primordial energy stands behind it. If there's no supporting pole, no framework can be made. And without the framework, there can be no beautiful image of Durga. Without giving up worldliness, a man cannot awaken his spiritual consciousness, nor can he realize God. He cannot but be a hypocrite as long as he has even a trace of worldly desire. God cannot be realized without guilelessness. Cherish love within your heart, abandon cunning and deceit. Through service, worship, selflessness, does Rama's blessed vision come. Even those engaged in worldly activities, such as office work or business, should hold to the truth. Truthfulness alone is the spiritual discipline in the Kali Yuga. Pran Krishna, yes, sir. It is said in the Mahanirvana Tantra, O goddess, this religion enjoins it upon one to be truthful, self-controlled, devoted to the welfare of others, unagitated, and compassionate. Master, yes, but these ideas must be assimilated. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on the small couch. He was in an ecstatic mood and looked at Rakhal. Suddenly, he was filled with the tender feeling of parental love towards his young disciple and spiritual child. Presently, he went into samadhi. The devotees sat speechless, looking at the master with wondering eyes. Regaining partial consciousness, the master said, "Why is my spiritual feeling rekindled at the sight of Rakhal? The more you advance towards God, the less you will see of his glories and grandeur. The aspirant at first has a vision of the goddess with 10 arms. There is a great display of power in that image. The next vision is that of the deity with 2 arms. There are no longer 10 arms holding various weapons and missiles. Then the aspirant has a vision of Gopala, in which there is no trace of power. It is the form of a tender child. Beyond that, there are other visions also. The aspirant then sees only light. Reasoning and discrimination vanish after the attainment of God and communion with him in samadhi. How long does a man reason and discriminate? As long as he is conscious of the manifold, as long as he is aware of the universe, of embodied beings, of I and you. He becomes silent when he is truly aware of unity. This is the case with Trailangya Swami. He was a noted monk in Benares that Ramakrishna had met and had observed a lifelong vow of silence. Have you watched a feast given to the Brahmins? At first there is a great uproar, but the noise lessens as their stomachs become more and more filled with food. When the last course of curd and sweets is served, one hears only the sound, soup, soup, as they scoop up the curd in their hands. There is no other sound. Next is the stage of sleep, samadhi. There is no more uproar. To M and Pran Krishna, many people talk of Brahmagyana, but their minds are always preoccupied with lower things: house, buildings, money, name, and sense pleasures. As long as you stand at the foot of the monument, this is a reference to a monument in Calcutta, so long do you see horses, carriage, Englishmen, and Englishwomen. But when you climb to its top, you behold the sky and the ocean stretching to infinity. Then you do not enjoy buildings, carriages, horses, or men. They look like ants. All such things as attachment to the world and enthusiasm for lust and greed disappear after the attainment of the knowledge of Brahman. Then comes the cessation of all passions. When the log burns, it makes a crackling noise and one sees the flame. But when the burning is over, only ash remains. There is no more noise to be heard. Thirst disappears with the destruction of attachment. Finally comes peace. The nearer you come to God, the more you feel peace. Peace, 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 supreme peace. The nearer you come to the Ganga, the more you feel its coolness. You will feel completely soothed when you plunge into the river. But the universe and its created beings and the 24 cosmic principles all exist because God exists. Nothing remains if God is eliminated. The number increases if you put many zeros after the figure 1, but the zeros don't have any value if the 1 is not there. The Master continued, there are some who come down, as it were, after attaining the knowledge of Brahman, after samadhi, and retain the ego of knowledge, or the ego of devotion, just as there are people who, of their own sweet will, stay in the marketplace after the market breaks up. This was the case with sages like Narada. They kept the ego of devotion for the purpose of teaching men. Shankaracharya kept the ego of knowledge for the same purpose. God cannot be realized if there is the slightest attachment to the things of the world. A thread cannot pass through the eye of a needle if the tiniest fiber sticks out. The anger and lust of a man who has realized God are only appearances. They are like burnt string. It looks like a string, but a mere puff blows it away. God is realized as soon as the mind becomes free from attachment. Whatever appears in the pure mind is the voice of God. That which is pure mind is also pure buddhi. That again is pure Atman, because there is nothing pure but God. And in order to realize God, one must go beyond dharma and adharma. The Master sang in his melodious voice, come, let us go for a walk, O mind, to Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree, and there beneath it gather the 4 fruits of life. Sri Ramakrishna went to the southeast veranda of his room and sat down. Pran Krishna and the other devotees accompanied him. Hazra too was sitting there. The Master said to Pran Krishna with a smile, Hazra is not a man to be trifled with. If one finds the big Darga here, then Hazra is the smaller Darga. He was referring to himself. All laughed at the Master's words. A certain gentleman, Navakumar by name, came to the door and stood there. At the sight of the devotees, he immediately left. Oh, egotism incarnate, Sri Ramakrishna remarked. About 9:30 in the morning, Pran Krishna took leave of the Master. Soon afterwards, a minstrel sang some devotional songs to the accompaniment of a stringed instrument. The Master was listening to the songs when Kedar Chatterjee, a householder devotee, entered the room clad in his office clothes. He was a man of devotional temperament and cherished the attitude of the gopis of Vrindavan. Words about God would make him weep. The sight of Kedar awakened in the Master's mind the episode of Vrindavan in Sri Krishna's life. Intoxicated with divine love, the Master stood up and sang, addressing Kedar, tell me, friend, how far is the grove where Krishna, my beloved, dwells? His fragrance reaches me even here, but I am tired and can walk no further. Sri Ramakrishna assumed the attitude of Sri Radha to Krishna and went into deep samadhi while singing the song. He stood there, still as a picture on canvas, with tears of divine joy running down his cheeks. Kedar knelt before the Master, touching his feet. He chanted a hymn. We worship the Brahman consciousness in the lotus of the heart, the undifferentiated who is adored by Hari, Hara, and Brahma, who is attained by yogis in the depths of their meditation, the scatterer of the fear of birth and death, the essence of knowledge and truth, the primal seed of the world. After a time, the Master regained consciousness of the relative world. Soon Kedar took his leave and returned to his office in Calcutta. At midday, Ramlal brought the Master a plate of food which had been offered in the Kali temple. Like a child, he ate a little of everything. Later, in the afternoon, several Marwari devotees entered the master's room, where Rakhal and M were seated. A Marwari devotee: Sir, what is the way? Master: there are two ways. One is the path of discrimination. The other is that of love. Discrimination means to know the distinction between the real and the unreal. God alone is the real and permanent. Substance, all else is illusory and impermanent. The magician alone is real. His magic is illusory. This is discrimination. Discrimination and renunciation. Discrimination means to know the distinction between the real and the unreal. Renunciation means to have dispassion for the things of the world. One cannot acquire them all of a sudden. They must be practiced every day. One should renounce lust and greed mentally at first. Then, by the will of God, one can renounce it both mentally and outwardly. It is impossible to ask the people of Calcutta to renounce all for the sake of God. One has to tell them to renounce mentally. Through the discipline of constant practice, one is able to give up attachment to lust and greed. That is what the Gita says. By practice, one acquires uncommon power of mind. Then one doesn't find it difficult to subdue the sense organ and to bring anger, lust, and the like under control. Such a man behaves like a tortoise, which, once it is tucked in its limbs, never puts them out. You cannot make the tortoise put its limbs out again, though you chop it to pieces with an axe. Marwari devotee: revered sir, you just mentioned two paths. What is the other path? Master: the path of bhakti, or zealous love for God. Weep for God in solitude with a restless soul and ask him to reveal himself to you. Cry to your mother Shyama with a real cry, O mind, and how can she hold herself from you? Marwari devotee: Sir, what is the meaning of the worship of the personal God, and what is the meaning of God without form or attribute? Master: as you recall your father by his photograph, so likewise the worship of the image reveals in a flash the nature of reality. Do you know what God with form is like? Like bubbles rising on an expanse of water. Various divine forms are seen to rise out of the great akasha of consciousness. The incarnation of God is one of these forms. The primal energy sports, as it were, through the activities of a divine incarnation. What is there in mere scholarship? God can be attained by crying to him with a longing heart. There is no need to know many things. He who is an acharya has to know different things. One needs a sword and a shield to kill others. But to kill oneself, a needle or a nail knife suffices. One ultimately discovers God by trying to know who this I is. Is this I the flesh, the bones, the blood, or the marrow? Is it the mind or the buddhi? Analyzing thus, you realize at last that you are none of these. This is called the process of neti-neti, not this, not this. One can neither comprehend nor touch the Atman. It is without qualities or attributes. But according to the path of devotion, God has attributes. To a devotee, Krishna is spirit, his abode is spirit, and everything about him is spirit. The Marwari devotees saluted the master and took their leave. At the approach of evening, Sri Ramakrishna went out to look at the sacred river. The lamp was lighted in his room. The master chanted the hallowed name of the Divine Mother and meditated on her. Then the evening worship began in the various temples. The sound of gongs floating on the air, mingling with the murmuring voice of the river. Peace and blessedness reigned everywhere. And we're going to stop there today at the end of chapter 7. Are there any questions or any comments about what we have read? Okay. Tomorrow's lecture will be The Spiritual Quest by Swami Vedarupananda. And next Wednesday we will have Spiritual Treasures of Swami Turiyananda, the letters of Swami Turiyananda. Saturday the 20th will be the Gospel reading of Sri Ramakrishna. So I hope we see you all then, and take care, stay cool, stay healthy. We'll end with a chant. Om, peace, 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 Hari Om, Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.